It worked.
Yay. Well, it's delightful to be with you again. You ready for me, Maya?
Yes,
All
very.
right. Okay. It's delightful to be with you again this Palm Sunday. Um, I would invite you to, as we begin, to join me in a time of meditation. So first, find a comfortable position in which you can remain alert as well as relaxed. And we begin this process of relaxation by simply feeling our breathing, feeling it as it flows in and out effortlessly, taking on its own perfect life rhythm, connecting us to the atmosphere and to all life on earth. This breathing, we feel our oneness with divine energy. Our bodies begin to relax. We gently withdraw our attention from concerns of the day, of the past, or the future. Withdraw our attention from thoughts of the world and conditions. Move our attention inward to realize the divine presence. To celebrate that presence, as our daily word said this morning. Celebrate my awareness of the divine presence. This breathing, this inward turning, we feel that divine presence as life, the energy that flows all through our bodies. We direct our attention now to an awareness of that energy, that life, every part of us. Direct our attention to the divine idea of body. That idea is in divine mind, a perfect body, a body of light. So as you feel the energy of your body, recognize that divine light visible to the inner eye, visible to the inner consciousness. Feel the energy, perceive the light in every part of you, flowing downward, your attention downward to your feet or upward to your head, focused at the center of the heart. Let the Spirit guide you where to direct your attention. Let it rest there in a knowing and awareness of the divine presence. Recognize the omnipresence of Spirit, the omnipresence of God, and that means whatever God is, I am. Whatever God is, I am. We bring others into our circle of prayer in our consciousness, connect with them through love. We know also for them, whatever God is, you are. Wherever you are, God is. We focus on this presence. We are knowing God is Spirit. I am Spirit. I am the Spirit that directs my attention, my thoughts, my feelings, my body. As I direct my attention where my attention flows, my experience goes. This is my dominion. It's the very presence of God individualized. God is Spirit. I am Spirit. God is perfect life. I am perfect life. I hold to this idea of the perfect life of God that expresses in me, as me, and through me. What is wisdom? I am wise. I am wise as I remain open to divine guidance, as I use my faculty of understanding, my faculty of wisdom, to perceive the right and perfect actions, that which ought to be done by me. Remembering the affirmation Charles Fillmore wrote in his 90s, I fairly sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm and spring forth with a mighty faith, do the things that ought to be done by me. I do not concern myself with what others should or should not be doing. I concern myself only with that which ought to be done by me, guided by divine wisdom, filled with zeal and enthusiasm, springing forth with a mighty faith. So this time we are receptive to that which ought to be done by us, knowing that the light, the wisdom, the insight, the intuition will arrive in our awareness at the right and perfect time to take action. Now our action is action of mind, cooperation with the law of divine mind. The divine ideas I hold and consciousness manifest in my world. I hold to the divine idea of life, wisdom, and of love. The love that connects me with others, the love that harmonizes my body, that unifies my consciousness with the universe. I am wisdom, I am life, I am light. I am wisdom, I am life, I am love, I am light. I am life, I am love, I am light. Let's hold this idea for a few moments in the silence, this fundamental truth of our being. Life, I am love, I am light. In the silence. So we are knowing this and feeling this. I am life, I am love, I am light. Spirit of infinite mind, love, life, light, peace, wisdom, power is now and always manifesting in me, through me, and as me, and in and through and as all those I behold in my consciousness. I behold the Christ in me, I behold the Christ in you. This way, we celebrate our awareness of the divine presence. We rejoice and are grateful in the truth. We carry this with us, not just this day, but every day and every moment. In the eternal now, we are divine life, love, and light, and we are grateful. So it is. Amen. Now bring our attention gently back to this place, to this event, to this joining together as a community of faith. So, as Reverend Maya mentioned, today I'm completing the discussion of the five principles. I wanted to point out to you before I begin that discussion that I've put something in the chat stream. It's for those of you who are on computer, obviously not necessarily those in the room, but it's some references I'm going to be making later to some yogic terms. And just in case you're interested in how they're spelled, I thought I'd put that in the chat stream. So, as I said, today we're going to continue the discussion. I am also going to make reference in this discussion to the connection of our topic with Palm Sunday. So I'll get to that at the end. But first, I'll recall that we just started discussion of the Unity's third basic principle. The third basic principle, which was the law of mind, what we usually call law of mind action. We described it as we create our reality through the thoughts we hold in consciousness. And so this, again, I'll just review briefly. This follows from these truths that we are individualizations of divine mind. Divine mind is creator and perceiver of all, being infinite and omniscience, omnipresence. We are each part of the creative process, therefore, and perceivers of these divine ideas we call the universe. We perceive the ideas to which we direct our attention. What we perceive is what we experience. In that sense, our thoughts create our experience. We also call this the law of mind action. Jesus stated the law of mind action in simple and provocative ways. He said, whatever you ask in prayer, believe you have received it and it will be yours. If you ask in prayer, believe you have received it and it will be yours. Now, belief is not the same thing as thought, because we don't always believe what we think. But beliefs are thoughts or ideas that we have accepted as true, right? Beliefs are thoughts or ideas that we have accepted as true. We have this capacity to accept ideas as true. Beliefs can be established by habits of thought, by reasoning, by evidence, or simple faith. We simply believe. And once beliefs are established, they are a part of our experience in some sense and in some way. They become a part of our experience, and we therefore receive what we believe, as Jesus taught. He also expressed the law in another simple and somewhat provocative way. He said, ask and you will receive, seek and you will find, and knock, and it will be open to you. Now, this statement seems on the surface to be about taking physical action. However, we can also silently, mentally ask, seek, and knock. So, in fact, everything that we do physically begins with that inner seeking, asking, and knocking. Here is the challenge, one of the challenges of this law of mind action. Our minds have a natural tendency to wander. Right? So we think in different ways. Worry thinking is asking, knocking, and seeking trouble. Thinking of the good, whatever that may be, our understanding of good. Thinking of the good is asking, seeking, and knocking for good. And the challenge is that most of us have mixed thoughts and consequently mixed results. We get what we ask for in this sort of very general, surprising way, but we're not always fully aware of what it is that we're asking for, not always fully aware of what it is that we're thinking and what those habits of thoughts are going to generate in our experience, in our belief system. So this brings us to the fourth basic principle of unity. We become aware of our oneness with God through prayer and meditation. Prayer and meditation is a disciplined way of asking, seeking, knocking, claiming, or affirming only the good, only the divine reality. So prayer, affirmative prayer, is the fourth basic principle. It's how we become aware of our oneness with the good through prayer and meditation. Now, of course, this has been a part of this idea of affirmative prayer has been part of unity teachings since the beginning. And one of the things that I find interesting in the teachings is that Charles Fillmore recognized that the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, the Notre Père, he recognized that as really being a series of truth affirmations rather than as requests, which may or may not be granted. Prayer is often done in a sort of begging, beseeching, hoping way without necessarily an expectation that what we ask will be fulfilled. But the Lord's Prayer, as Charles pointed out, is a series of affirmations. And one of the ways he pointed that out in his book, Teach Us to Pray, is he quoted the Lord's Prayer from the Fenton Bible version. Now, Farrar Fenton was a multilinguist translator who spent decades really doing his own translation of the Bible, trying to turn the original Greek into to express the meaning of the Greek. And one of the things that we find in that is that the Lord's Prayer, as it's found in Greek, is in um, is given in an unusual tense. All right, we have presence, present, past, future tense of verbs, but Greek has an unusual tense that English doesn't have. It's called aorist imperative. There will be a quiz later, or aorist imperative. But this particular tense implies a command to continue what has been done in the past, a command to continue what has been done in the past. So English doesn't have an equivalent tense to that. It's not. It makes the prayer's meaning difficult to translate. But Fenton did a pretty good job of conveying the meaning as implied by or as indicated by the tense of the Greek in the prayer. Okay, so set aside that technical stuff for a moment, and this is the way Fenton translated the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in the heavens, your name must be being hallowed. Your kingdom must be being restored. Your will must be being done, both in heaven and upon earth. Give us today our tomorrow's bread. Forgive us our faults as we forgive those offending us, for you would not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from its evil. Point is, this comes very close to being simply a series of affirmations of what is being done. That's what the tense implies. Something that has been being done and continues to be being done, right? So again, it's rather awkward to translate it directly into English. Your will must be being done. Your will continues being done on earth as in heaven. But it's a series of affirmations, and we can understand this prayer more fully when we recognize that that's what it is. Jesus affirming what he already holds to be true. The kingdom of God is already within us. We are already forgiven as we forgive. We are already being provided all that we need, our daily bread. So this gives us I want to say, a biblical justification, I suppose, for the teaching of affirmative prayer and a recognition that that's really what Jesus meant by his prayer. That's why it is perfectly consistent with his idea that whatever you pray for, ask believing that you have received and it will be done for you. And we accept it as the truth already, whatever it is that we are praying. Now, to get more deeply into this idea of prayer as taught by unity, um, I'll point out, or I want to discuss a little bit, the 5-step prayer process in unity. I guess our unity teachers in the past really liked the number 5 for some reason. Number 5 is a number of growth and life and consciousness. But in any case, just as they summarized the unity teachings into 5 basic principles, they also summarized the prayer teaching as a 5-step prayer process. Now, Charles Fillmore in his writings, and Myrtle Fillmore too, each wrote about these different steps in different ways, but didn't actually come up with a 5-step summary. That was done by later unity teachers. One teacher who was important in that process was Francis Folks, who wrote a book called Effectual Prayer. Effectual Prayer was used for many years as a basic textbook in Unity and the teaching about prayer. And so she wrote in her book, she wrote these different chapters, and they contain this sequence of the five steps, each chapter on one of these steps. And then later Unity teachers who were teaching the book and teaching, um, effectual prayer summarized at some point into five basic steps. So it's not entirely clear who formulated this exactly, but it does reflect the teachings of Charles Fillmore and the teachings that are found in Francis Folk's books and in other early Unity teachings. So it's a five-step prayer method that I learned in school and many others before me learned and many others after learned. Five steps. The five steps of the Unity prayer process are relaxation, concentration, meditation, realization, and gratitude. So I'm going to go into each of these five steps to clarify them. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is that the Unity prayer process, as an experience, is actually very similar to what is taught in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is the Yoga Sutras are the classic texts and the basis of all yogic meditation. All the different schools turn to this Patanjali's work as sort of the essential thing. So that's what the things I put in the chat stream, those terms. I'm going to be tying those in as we go along through the five steps and to show how they're connected with Unity's five-step prayer approach. And one of the reasons I want to do this is simply to recognize that when people begin to seek for God and they develop certain kinds of habits that work for them, whether we call it prayer, whether we call it meditation, they tend to be along the same lines. I could, cite from Christian mystics and others to, again, point to these same steps, but I don't want to get it that complicated. I'm just going to look at the basic steps as taught in Unity, and then make that connection with this yogic teaching. Okay, so the first step is relaxation. The way it's described on the Unity website is begin relaxing your body and opening your mind to an awareness of God. Breathe deeply. Frances Folks described relaxation in this way. She said, to be physically at rest aids in concentration, cutting out the interference of the intellect. To relax is to become open and receptive. Charles Fillmore said, loosening the tight mental grip we have on ourselves in order that the healing Christ life may flow freely through our being. Relaxation is loosening that tight mental grip in order to allow the healing Christ life to flow freely through us. So it begins with relaxation. Now, the Yoga Sutras, the teachings that I referred to earlier, talks about the eight limbs of yoga. This is very basic to Hindu teachings, the eight limbs of yoga. Now, the first two limbs of the eight are actually about behavior, things we should not do, things that we should do, at least in that yogic teaching. So I'm going to start actually with the third limb, which is really where it begins to talk about this process of yogic meditation. The third limb is asana, and asana just means posture. And this teaching of asana developed into the whole school of hatha yoga, where there are a lot of different exercises that are done, physical kinds of exercises and postures that were developed over the years. The Yoga Sutras come from like the second century, so very ancient, and they've been developed over time. But the original idea was simply to sit in a posture in which you can stay still for an extended period of time. Usually that is a firm and erect sitting. So even though posture is not a step in the Unity prayer process, as a matter of fact, we are usually sitting still in chairs and told to relax or find a comfortable position. Uh, a posture is assumed. A posture is described. The physical body, we put the physical body in a position where it can be still for a time. That's a very important piece of this. Okay, so even though it's not part of the 5 steps of prayer, it does fit in with the relaxation part, the beginning point. So the third limb, posture. The fourth limb is called pranayama, which literally means breath observation, right? And it's in a more extensive meaning, it's control of prana. Breath was associated with the fundamental energy of life and controlling that energy. So pranayama in Hinduism developed in the same way asana developed into hatha yoga, pranayama developed into prana yoga, where all of the exercise involved breathing in different patterns because the yogis found that through experimentation that breathing in different patterns, in one out, in one nose, nostril out the other, holding it for a certain amount of time, letting it go, and so on, that changing these breath patterns changes our state of consciousness and makes us sensitive to and more in control of the energy of the body, right? So this idea of breathing developed is very important as the fourth limb in yoga. And you may have noticed, in fact, probably noticed today, unity prayer leaders frequently give directions for breathing as part of the relaxation process. They'll say, take a deep breath, take 3 deep cleansing breaths, those sorts of things. I usually just tell people to observe their breathing because I found as if we pay attention to our breath, it will fairly quickly take on a natural, comfortable, relaxed rhythm. So this whole direction to give a direction for how to breathe is intended to help us relax, and there are other methods for relaxation as well that we may use. One of the great Unity teachers, Ed Rabel, once came up to me and said, I hate it when people tell me how to breathe, and then he walked away. He was a funny guy. He would say these things sort of abruptly, and I understood what he said. I understood what he was saying, and it's one of the reasons I just tell people to observe their breath rather than telling them how many breaths to take and that sort of thing. But anyway, that's part of the relaxation process. Just breathe. Just breathe. And this is something that you can do even in your everyday life when you just need to take a moment to unclench, to become less tense. It's just take a moment to focus on your breathing. Take a breath, let yourself relax so you can remain in control and move forward in a state of calm. So that's the first step. Relaxation it involves posture, it involves breath, it involves an intention to relax. First step, relaxation. The second step is concentration. And this is described again in Unity in this way. Concentration is release any thought of the world around you. Begin to think about God. Release any thought of the world around you. Begin to think about God. Focus your mind on a single thought. Repeat this idea over and over, either silently or aloud, until it becomes your only thought. So this is concentration, drawing our attention from the outer world, moving inward and focusing on an idea. Usually it's an affirmation. Sometimes we use visualizations. It can be a single word even, but it's the idea of pulling the attention inward and directing it to a single pointed concentration. Francis Folks described it as a process of stilling the unruly or irrelevant thoughts so that our mind may give all its attention to the one thing desired. We concentrate on holy thoughts and build them strong. Charles Fillmore said that concentration forms a mental lodestone in the mind, to which thought substance rushes like iron filings to a magnet, bringing the forces, whether mental or physical, to a common purpose. So Charles uses the illustration of a magnet. Concentration is magnetizing your consciousness to attract the substance or the forms or the things that you are concentrating on. So in this step called concentration, we're often told to turn your attention inward, or words to that effect, become still and centered, and so on. We say things like that. But the idea is we draw our attention inward, we withdraw it from the sense world, right? We withdraw even our attention even from thoughts of the day or concerns that we may have about conditions. We withdraw our attention from that and focus it inward in a single pointed way to create this divine magnet to attract that which we would have manifest in our world. So then the fundamental idea is to concentrate on the presence of God or the Christ within, or a series of truth affirmations. So that's concentration. Now, again, there's two steps or two limbs of yoga that amount to the same thing as our teaching on concentration. The fifth limb is pratyahara, which basically means withdrawing our attention from sense objects or the restraint of the senses from their objects. So in yoga, this is done. One of the practices they have is just observing your thoughts without attachment. And in doing so, they settle down, the mind becomes calm. Instead of jumping around like a drunk monkey, which is frankly what most of our minds tend to do when we don't have them under control, right? So it's settling down the mind first, maybe by focusing our attention on our thoughts and just viewing them without attachment, but it's also, directing the attention inward. So pratyahara and this phase of concentration, if you will, is very similar to what's called mindfulness meditation in the Buddhist tradition, this observing of the thoughts until they calm down. The Taoists also talk about um, stilling the mind, right? That's part of their teaching. So the fifth limb, pratyahara, drawing the attention inward. The sixth limb is dharana, which is the word that means of the limbs of yoga, it's the word that means concentration. Okay. So there's a kind of a phasing into this concentration, and concentration in this yogic teaching is fixing the mind on a spot or fixing the mind on an idea. So a common practice in the yogic tradition is to try to direct the attention to a spot on the body. So it might be a hand, it might be the heart, it might be one of the chakras, it may be it, but often it's a physical a location within the body. They used to talk about um, some of Western detractors of yoga used to call it navel gazing, right? Focusing on the navel. Well, the navel is near where one of the chakras are, so that's where that sort of insult came from, right? But in the yogic tradition, one moves. So, for example, if you're to direct your attention to a spot where one of the chakras is located, or what we call the power centers in unity, you focus there and then maybe visualize a lotus of light, right? Lotus is a sacred flower to the um, in the yogic in the Eastern tradition, right? So imagining there this light, or you might imagine a power center radiating with light. Now, in truth, for concentration, there's any number of things that you could focus on. You basically want to focus on some kind of spiritual idea. And in a way, it doesn't really matter what that idea is or what that center in the body is. It's whatever seems appropriate for you at the time. In fact, Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras mentions many different things, many ideas, and spots in the body, I guess you could say, that one could concentrate on. So in discussing concentration, he mentions a number of options, but then he closes by saying, or by meditation on anything that appeals to one as good. Right? So we do want it to be a good idea that we're focusing on, and then it's up to us to choose what that idea is, right? But that's the idea again of concentration. So second step is withdrawing the attention from the outer world and focusing in on one central idea, okay, some idea of good. And this leads to the third step, which is meditation. Allow this focused state of mind to move you into a deeper awareness of God, the Unity website says. Allow this focused state of mind to move into a deeper awareness of God. So it's a continuation of focus. So first you choose the spot, you fix your attention there, but then you continue to meditate on it. Frances Folks gives a good description of what that means. She said, to meditate on a subject is to give it attentive, earnest thought. with the idea of having all the meaning revealed. That is, all the meaning that one is capable of receiving at the time. So this is exactly the same as the yogic process. The idea is to penetrate into the idea until you, in effect, become one with it, and until you allow it, the idea that you're focusing on, to unfold its meaning in your consciousness, its deeper meaning, its deeper energy. Charles Fillmore gave a very nice brief description of what meditation is. He said it's a steady effort of the mind to know God, a steady effort of the mind to know God. So it's sustaining concentration, right? That's what meditation is in our teaching, and it's also what meditation is in the yogic teaching. Seventh limb of yoga is called dhyana. Again, you can look for the spelling in the chat stream if you want to. Dhyana it basically just does mean meditation, and it just does mean sustained concentration on the point or idea. So the mind flows into it, finding its internal meaning and nature. So that's the description that's given of what dhyana is sustained concentration on the point or the idea, so that the mind flows into it, finding its internal meaning and nature. Dhyana. By the way, for those of you who are fascinated by world religions and the connections, the Japanese word Zen is actually derived from dhyana and means the same thing. It means meditation. Zen is dhyana. So that's the third step in the process is meditation, that deeper and unfolding concentration. Fourth step in the process is called in unity realization. Realization. So we have relaxation, concentration, meditation, and realization. And then it kind of means just what it sounds like, where the idea becomes a reality to us, the realization. So again, the description on the Unity website is, from the depth of your being, know you are one with God. Listen for the inspiration of God. Charles Fillmore actually wrote quite a bit on realization. Francis Folks wrote on it as well, but Charles wrote quite a bit on it. In fact, if you want kind of a pretty full explanation of it, you can look either in the book Jesus Christ Heals or in my book, The Essential Charles Fillmore. There's a chapter that's on realization. So he fully goes into what realization is. One of the brief descriptions Fillmore provides is this: to a metaphysician, realization is the conviction that a person gets when they have persistently concentrated their attention on an ideal until they feel assured of the fulfillment of that ideal. So it's a kind of insurance that comes, assurance, an inner assurance or conviction that comes from this persistent concentration. And he also wrote, the supreme realization is unity with God mind, complete oneness with the Christ consciousness. So this is what he's focusing on for the idea of prayer and for what it is that is to be realized, made real in our consciousness. The realization of our unity with God mind, or complete oneness with Christ consciousness. Okay. So that's what Charles understood realization to mean. And the equivalent of that, again, in the yogic system, is the eighth limb. And the word is a word you may have heard, samadhi. Samadhi. So when one arrives at samadhi, one arrives at, this basically means, sort of a literal sense, it means absorption, to become fully absorbed in the idea that you're focusing on, so that you are one with that idea. There's no separation in your consciousness from that idea. But also, samadhi can also mean or be translated as super consciousness. So it's sometimes simply called the super consciousness, samadhi. So again, this is the realization. In this state, the ego or the feeling of I dissolves into super consciousness, into an enlightenment, which gives metaphysical knowledge, which manifests as unselfishness and various other divine qualities. So it's an attaining, this is sort of the highest state of meditation and liberation in yoga. This is what the yogi is attempting to do in meditation, is achieve samadhi, this super consciousness, what Charles Fillmore called the realization of the Christ consciousness. So I find it quite fascinating that when I study the yogic teachings and the 8 limbs of yoga, to find this, very strong similarity between Unity's uh, process of prayer, 5-step process of prayer, and these limbs of yoga as taught in the classic Hindu tradition. As I said, this realization is the fourth of 5 steps. What's the fifth step? Well, it turns out there's no equivalent in the yogic system for the fifth step, but it certainly is a big part of Western spirituality, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and of course, unity. The fifth step is gratitude. Gratitude. So again, the website says, let gratitude be your heart's joyous response to this experience of communion with God and God's infinite goodness. Give thanks for blessings to come, ready to receive your good. Gratitude. So after we've attained this state of realization, there's this final step of gratitude, of letting your heart's joyous have a joyous response to this experience of communion. This is what Charles Fillmore said about this fifth step, or some of the things he said. Charles wrote that the highest form of prayer is to open our minds and quietly realize that the one omnipresent intelligence knows our thoughts and instantly answers, even before we have audibly expressed our desires. This being true, we should ask and at the same time give thanks that we have already received. Give thanks that we have already received. Persistency in prayer awakens the spiritual consciousness and sets into perpetual glow the core of the soul. When this has been accomplished, one is in a constant state of thanksgiving and praising, and the joy of a conscious union with creative mind is realized. Okay. So that's the completion of prayer, this realization of praise and joy and gratitude of the divine. And finally, we come to the fifth basic unity principle, which is that we must put spiritual truth into practice in order to change our lives. Again, this is illustrated, this idea of putting the truth into practice, I think, is beautifully illustrated in what's known in our tradition as the Fillmore Covenant, when Charles and Fillmore wrote this covenant out with God. I'm just going to share part of that to give the idea. They wrote, "We hereby dedicate ourselves, our time, our money, all we have and all we expect to have, to the Spirit of truth. It being understood and agreed that said Spirit of truth shall render unto us an equivalent for this dedication in peace of mind, health of body, wisdom, understanding, love, life, and abundant supply of all things necessary to meet every want without making any of these things the object of our existence." So the idea here is to dedicate all that one is and has to this spirit of truth, to the spiritual path. That includes not only prayer, but action, obviously. The action of prayer as action. So the covenant is a prayer of action as well as of mind and heart. This is what they dedicated their work to. And again, I can refer to Patanjali and find a parallel in his sutras. He writes, one of the sutras said, mortification, study, and surrendering fruits of work to God are called Kriya Yoga. Kriya means contemplated or internal action, and it's a particular teaching within the larger, uh, compartment of karma yoga, action yoga. It's the idea that one can also make action a prayer. Now, I want to just point out that in Patanjali's statement, when he uses that word mortification, that mortification really just means practicing self-control instead of letting our senses just push our body around. Our sense desires push the body around. We practice self-control. Study is studying spiritual teachings. And surrendering the fruits of work to God is an attitude. That's the attitude that's expressed in the Fillmore Covenant. I wanted to share a little bit about this idea of the prayer of action from one of my favorite Unity books. It's called Prayer, the Master Key by James Dillett Freeman, a section called Work as Prayer. And he wrote, we can pray when we are standing and waiting. We can pray when we are digging and building and running and lifting too. To pray is to ask and affirm. To pray is also to sow and till. Let us pray to be not so much God conscious as God used. Let me be your feet, God, and carry you wherever you direct me. Let my feet go where they go, because they would bring comfort for the suffering, and joy for sorrow, and food for hunger, and for the discouraged, faith and life. Let me be your eyes, God. Let me never stop looking for beauty and pointing it out to others. Let me be your voice, God. Let me never stop speaking truth. Let me be your hands, God. Let me never stop doing loving acts for other human beings. This to me is a really good description of what the prayer of action and practicing the truth we know, what that means to be the presence of God in the world. And finally, as promised, I wanted to point out connection between this teaching on prayer and the teaching on putting our truth into action. I want to point out a connection with the story of Palm Sunday that's celebrated today as part of the Holy Week in Christianity. Because this story can be understood as a metaphor or an allegory or metaphysical interpretation that has to do with the life of prayer and spiritual action. Jesus in the story, of course, represents the Christ, this principle of divinity and consciousness in all of us. And Jerusalem, the place he enters, literally means habitation of peace. Now, I know this is historically ironic. Historically, Jerusalem has seen as, let's say, as much strife and war as any place on earth. But the important thing in metaphysical and allegorical interpretation is the metaphorical meaning of the place. It's a state of what? A state of peace, a habitation of peace. That's literally what Jerusalem means. So when Jesus rides on a donkey into Jerusalem, it represents sitting in stillness with the Christ, right? Jesus representing the Christ, sitting in stillness with the Christ, humbly riding the body, which is what the donkey represents, humbly riding the donkey, the body, into a place of peace, the habitation of peace. And when we go with the Christ into meditation and prayer, our thoughts and feelings follow, celebrating and praising the Christ nature. Hosanna. This is one metaphysical and spiritual meaning of Palm Sunday. It's about going inward to a place of peace, focusing on and celebrating the Christ, the divinity within. And of course, we go in with the donkey, we go in with the body in a humble state. Where our minds go, there our bodies follow. When our minds go to peace, our bodies follow by relaxing. After entering that state of peace, Jerusalem, the Christ drives out thoughts of greed and worldliness. It withdraws from or drives out worldly thoughts, represented by Jesus clearing the money changers from the temple, drawing our attention from the sense world. The Christ then, in the story, teaches truth in Jerusalem. It's a whole section on truth teachings. This is concentration and meditation on divine ideas. And of course, the end of the story is resurrection. This is the realization of the Christ consciousness. This is the samadhi. And in this consciousness, and after this experience, we are, of course, filled with joyful gratitude. So the activities of Jesus from Palm Sunday to Easter in the story symbolize both meditation in the stillness and prayers of action, because he does physical actions in this process. During this time called the Holy Week in Christian tradition, I invite you to consider revisiting these stories and seeing in them the Christ in you, your thoughts, your prayers. This is a way to prepare for the resurrection, the realization of Christ in you, your hope of glory. Thank you and blessings.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.